Hello, everybody. Tom Nappy here, and we are joined by Peter Zheutlin. Peter, how are you?
Good. How are you, Tom?
Doing well. Can't complain. Uh, Fall is coming, and the weather's still beautiful, so that's a good sign. And we finally got some rain, so that's certainly nice. But I understand you're going to be at the Hopkinton Women's Club monthly meeting. But before we get into that, why don't you just tell us about yourself and tell us about what you do?
Well, I'm a lapsed lawyer, and like many lapsed lawyers, I became a writer at some point in my adult life, and I've written, I guess, 9 books now, and I do some freelance journalism. And the talk I'm giving to the Women's Club focuses on my first and my last book, which covered the same subject. First one was nonfiction, and the last one was a novel based on that story.
Terrific. So, how'd you end up getting involved with the Hopkinton Women's Club?
I'm not quite sure how they found me. People do have a way of finding you when you're an author and you've written something they're interested in. And as we'll get into, what I'm going to talk about is the story of an extraordinary woman at the turn of the 20th century who did a very radical thing. And women tend to find this story pretty engaging.
Excellent. So, how long have you been writing for, and how many books do you have in total?
Oh my God. So nine books altogether. I started writing, oh my goodness, probably 25 years ago. Did a lot of freelance writing for the Boston Globe and Christian Science Monitor and some other newspapers and magazines. And my first book was published in 2007. And got about a book every other year since then.
So, can you tell us what inspired the story that you're going to talk about? Around the World on Two Wheels is one of the books, and then Spin is the other book. Let's start off with Around the World on Two Wheels. Tell us about that story.
Same basic story, but in the early 1990s, my mother received a letter from a complete stranger telling her that he was researching the story of the first woman to go around the world on a bicycle. And he had done some genealogy research and suspected that my mother might be related to this woman in some way. My mother shared the letter with me. She had never heard of this woman, but it was clear from the information in the letter that he had actually found the right family. He had, we were in fact connected pretty directly to the woman that he was researching, but it was not a story that was known at all to my own family. And I got back to him on my mother's behalf and told him it sounded like an amazing story, but unfortunately we weren't able to help him because we had never heard of her. And I have my suspicions as to why that might be the case. But nevertheless, about 10 years later, the same gentleman wrote to me again, asking if we had learned anything in the 10 years, and we hadn't. And I had occasionally asked family members, older, grandparents, great aunts and uncles, complete blank, nothing on the internet about her. And 10 years later, in 2003, my interest was piqued sufficiently to dive in and see what I could find. I didn't think I'd find anything, but 4 years of intensive research allowed me to uncover an enormous amount of detail about this extraordinary woman who did something extraordinarily radical in the 1890s.
And that story kind of continues in Spin, if I'm correct.
Well, the first book, Around the World on Two Wheels, was my attempt to sort of establish the historical record of this journey, which had been lost to history for over a century. And that was a nonfiction account. It was sort of a, just the facts, ma'am account. A couple of years ago, the New York Times did what they call an overlooked obituary. They've been doing a series of obituaries in the Times about women and people of color who, in retrospect, the Times think were overlooked and didn't get an obituary they might have deserved, which is quite an honor in the New York Times. And they did an obituary about my ancestor. And my wife, who's very involved in the book club world, basically told me I had to revisit the story as a work of historical fiction because so many people like to read historical fiction, and I had already done the research. So Spin, which came out just last year, I revisit that story, but I throw a lot of my own imagination into it, fill out the record, as it were. And since my great grandaunt was quite a storyteller and quite a spin artist herself, I felt quite liberated to even layer my own imagination on top of hers. So what you get in Spin is truly anchored in a historical, set of historical facts, but with a fair amount of creativity thrown in. So the two books cover the same territory, but one is nonfiction and one is fiction.
Well, it sounds like very interesting, terrific stories. And you'll be with the Hopkinton Women's Club on September 19th for their monthly meeting. Where could people find more about you that want to learn a little bit more?
I have two websites. If you're interested in the story, my ancestor, by the way, wrote under an assumed name when she traveled the world by bicycle, and it was Annie Londonderry, because she had a corporate sponsor, the Londonderry Spring Water Company of Nashua, New Hampshire. She was a pioneer of sports-related marketing. So you can go to annielondonderry.com, and you'll find a lot more information about her and about the books. I also have an author website, which is my name, Peter Zheutlin, ZHEUTLIN.com, and you can see information about my other books too.
Well, Peter, we look forward to hearing you talk at the Hopkinton Women's Club monthly meeting, and thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us today.
Next time, I appreciate it and look forward to seeing everyone there.